I can safely say that this game is a beast. There is so many layers, so many mechanics, so much attention to detail that I'm just absolutely blown away with everything from the art direction, the storytelling. Everything has been absolutely amazing so far. I honestly thought the game was going to be pretty boring, but I was genuinely surprised that the game is actually a lot of fun to play. What's it like to play Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom if you've never played any of the other Zelda games? Follow me on my journey as we try to beat the game without ever having touched a single Zelda game. I'm a streamer from Canada, my name's John Panio, and I've been streaming for a few years now. I played a lot of games, but I've never owned a Switch. I never had the chance to play Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, or any Legend of Zelda game for the matter of fact, not even the DS or the Game Boy. However, with all the buzz surrounding Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, I decided that it was time to bite the bullet and fork out the 500 buckaroonies to get myself a Switch. Once I got the Switch, I quickly got myself the game and rushed home to stream it. Now, if you're like me and you've been living under a rock, you're probably wondering what Legend of Zelda is. Legend of Zelda is a franchise that is highly popular and a long-running video game series created by a Japanese game designer, Shigeru Miyamoto, and is developed and published by Nintendo. The franchise debuted in 1986 with the release of the first game, and has since become one of Nintendo's most iconic and successful franchises. The games in the Legend of Zelda series typically follow the adventures of a young hero named Link, who is often tasked with rescuing the princess of the Kingdom of Hyrule, Princess Zelda. The series is notable for its memorable characters such as Link, Zelda, Ganondorf, and other various supporting characters. When I first got control of Link, after the cutscene and exposition dump that I got, I could tell that this Link in this game right now was in his most jacked form. This dude had hearts out the wazoo and stamina of an ultra marathon athlete. The man was essentially Giga Chad. He was fully built and ready to go. However, having played a ton of RPGs, I could tell that there was no way I was going to stay in this form forever. We're going to get nerfed somehow. But more on that later. From the brief introduction of the game, it looks like after having defeated Ganondorf from the previous game, Breath of the Wild, it looks like there's this disturbance that has arisen from Hyrule Kingdom. So Link and Zelda decide to venture into the deep caverns of Hyrule Kingdom, where there's these underground passages that they weren't aware of from before. As they progress deeper, they find this lovely looking man with a hand sticking out of him. A few moments later, obviously, the hand falls off and you know shit's about to go down. We get absolutely throttled and annihilated, and our health total gets drained out to a measly 3 hearts. And oh yeah, our Master Sword, yeah, that gets shut down real fast. Honestly, not a bad start. Having been separated from Zelda, because she fell, we find ourselves in the bottom of the cavern, where our right arm, having been completely messed up, gets replaced with, well, the right arm that was sticking out of the body earlier. Yeah, it's ours now. Later on, we discover that this arm is from this furry called Rauru? Ruru? Rauru? Something along the lines of that, and that he was essentially the first king of Hyrule, but what do I know? And thus begins the tutorial of this game. We are greeted with this lovely scene as we dive headfirst into the game, and so far, not gonna lie, blown away. I find that something that I really struggled with was getting used to the controls of the Nintendo Switch. The last game that I played on controller was Sekiro, Dark Souls, Elden Ring, and those games that I usually use the controller for have different map setting. For example, in Dark Souls, Elden Ring, attack is using the R1, and on the Switch, attack is not on the R1, it's on the Y button. I will say trying to get used to switching weapons and navigating through the UI was a little bit challenging. It's intuitive, but it takes a little bit of muscle memory to get used to. Now, the first thing that made me realize that this was an amazing game was when I started cooking, not the first time, but the second time. I did not know how to cook the first time, so with the help of someone in Twitch chat, they taught me how to cook. I spent a few minutes here making a few dishes, just experimenting with different combinations of ingredients and just figuring out what I could do with the ingredients I had. It was honestly pretty fun. But do note that this was a campfire with a pot. Now, a few minutes later, I reach to a campfire, but this time this campfire doesn't have a nice pot to it. So thinking I could do the same thing that I did prior, which was take out my ingredients, throw it out on the pot and make it have a nice dish, the tutorial tells me that I should just take my ingredients and throw it by the campfire. Me thinking that it would do the same thing as the pot, it didn't. Instead of turning my dish into a, well, nice dish, it just roasted my vegetables and made them roasted. It did not make it into a nice dish, and this was where I was completely floored. Most video games, usually their cooking mechanic is cooking is going to be same throughout the entire world. If you reach a campfire, a stove, an oven, a whatever heat source, you can cook anything and everything in the same way. But in this game, they made it so that cooking in a pot and cooking by a campfire gives you different results, which is absolutely amazing. From a coding perspective, I have to say, it's a lot of extra work, but that little nuance right there actually just kind of almost put a tear in my eye. Just pretty close. Now, that combat has never really been my strong suit in any video game. I'm more of a thinker, less of a doer. I just do things first and think later. But when games like this, you kind of have to do both. Now, what I do like about the game is that it actually gives you a lot of options for combat. It's just that in the beginning when I was playing, there wasn't a lot of options for combat. It was just literally smack the guy with my stick and then smack him with a stronger stick and then smack him with a bigger stick, and that was it. And that was combat. But the combat did feel a little bit like Dark Souls, which I can kind of appreciate, and the game can be quite punishing sometimes. Now, my solution to fights were I hit the enemy as long as I could, and if they hit back, I take the hit. And eventually, one of us is going to go down, either them or me. I find out really quickly that that's not a good strategy. Monsters eventually start doing a ton of damage. I can only take 2 hits, maybe 3 hits max. Now, Link right now is on a mission to reunite with Zelda, since after falling down the cavern, we get separated from Zelda, and now we have to find her. However, we just know that she's in this building behind the door, and apparently we need to go to 2 shrines first to power ourselves up, so that way we can become worthy of opening the door. Great. We make our way to the shrines first to power ourselves up, and once we get to the first shrine, we are introduced to a new mechanic, which essentially allows us to grab and attach objects to each other. It works very similar to telekinesis and a magnet, which is pretty cool. So in this little shrine right here, I can grab objects and attach them to another one and create bridges and other things, which is pretty cool because then I started to realize that all those YouTube videos and TikTok videos I see of people building tanks, airplanes, and dude with flaming schlongs comes from this mechanic, which is pretty cool. However, I will say that this dungeon, once you finish it, you actually have to use what you learn to be able to get to the next shrine. And I'm not gonna lie, and it's a little bit embarrassing, but I messed up the first time. I was able to make the contraption to get myself to the other side, but then I realized that I did not hop onto it fast enough, and it left with Melt Me. And that's when I realized that the game developers actually thought about this, and they had more ingredients and items there, knowing that we're probably gonna mess up 1 or 2 times. So there's enough ingredients there to mess up 3 times. So I redid it, and on my second try, I was able to get myself over. Now, once we get to the next shrine, we encounter our first Korok, and these things are pretty cute. We had to solve a puzzle to reunite the Korok with their friend, and then we get some Korok seeds. No idea what the Korok seeds are for at all, but hey, I'll figure that out later. After that, we proceed to the next shrine. We get ourselves to our next power. Our next power is an ability to fuse our weapons together with something else. So in the shrine, we learned that we can attach different items to our arrows to make them have different affinities and effects. But not only that though, we can attach our weapons to items as well to give them also different affinities. For example, with the sword, we can attach a stone to it and it becomes a stone club, and then the stone club can break stones. And if you have a regular sword, you can't break stones. But if you have a sword with a stone attached to it, now you can. Pretty cool gameplay mechanic, I would say. Nice layering. However, once I was able to figure that out, we progress through the next area. We come across this little river here, and the game introduces us to Zonai devices. I was able to figure out that the Zonai devices were basically just battery cells to charge up your vehicles, because your vehicles can use fans to move, but in order to use those fans, you have to power them up, which drains batteries, which is pretty cool. But instead of progressing through the story, I decided that I was going to explore a little bit. I will say that this was where I encountered my first challenge. The first challenge that I encountered was this little stupid bad boy. There's this little puzzle here off to the side where you just have to move these 4 containers around to make it so that you can have a safe path to get to this island over here. I decided that once you got over there, there was this monster here, and I decided to fight it. So far, the battles have been pretty easy, so I thought it'd be a great idea to just exchange blows with the dude. Needless to say, bad idea. I got basically 2 shots. And what happened was, luckily, I wasn't sent back all the way to the river. I was just respawned in front of him, which is okay. So this time around, though, I was able to beat him down, which is great. But then I realized that the treasure chest is actually at an area where I just can't reach it. So I try to go back to the boxes, the floating capsules, and grab it, but fortunately, I'm too far away, so I can't grab it. I make my way all the way up this side of the cliff, go all the way around, start moving the containers, and then I make a leap of faith, and I mess up. I trigger fall damage, and I die. And this was annoying, was because the game took me all the way back to the point where I had to fight this bad boy again. This time, I was able to beat him with little trouble, and eventually after many tries, I was finally able to get myself up to the treasure chest. But then I got something called Amber, and I have no idea what Amber's for or what it's worth. So at this point, no clue, but lesson learned. I'll save more. Probably should save if I have the opportunity to, because this game doesn't punish you for saving, unlike other games. So I decided that it's just better for me to save and not have to worry about dealing with that whole ordeal again. We make our way back to the river, and then we continue to progress. We make our way through the river with our nice little contraption, and we get ourselves into the next area. But our next stumbling block that I encountered was when I was scaling up this mountain. I had this great idea that I'd be able to build a bridge with a bunch of logs to get myself to places where I couldn't, and to places where I'm pretty sure there's treasure. And lo and behold, there is treasure, but there's also 2 baddies up there first. Having learned from my mistake previously, I decided to save first. So once I made my save, I decided that it was time to proceed aggressively. Obviously, these bad boys notice me, and obviously because I'm a pro gamer, I get absolutely annihilated, but that's okay. The second try goes around town, and honestly, it goes a bit better, but during the scuffle, I accidentally knock one of the guys off the ledge. So I try shooting him down, but that wasn't doing a lot of damage. So I just jump off the ledge and finish him off. And we're good. The treasure chest unlocks and I'm able to go back up. But unfortunately, my log bridge is no longer there. What happened was, when I died, the overworld reset. All the trees got respawned and all my contraption disappeared. So then I had to go all the way back, chop down trees, and throw the trees back up. Now, what's annoying is that I probably spent more time trying to climb up this log than making it. But that's kind of the lesson that if you have a super thin log, you better have really good movement mechanics. However, with just a second left on our cold resistance food, we were able to make it to the next shrine. Now this next shrine, we gain a fun little mechanic that allows us to go through ceilings. It allows me to travel through solid objects and pop out on the other side, which is simple enough. And once we complete the dungeon, obviously with any new mechanic the game throws at us, we have to use the mechanic right away. And that's the one thing that, honestly, I really enjoy about this game. It's the little detail that anytime after you enter into a dungeon that gives you a new mechanic, right after completing the shrine, you're immediately thrust into a situation or scenario where you have to use what you learned to be able to progress, which I really like. Honestly, our school system should really learn from this. Now, as a tutorial, this is a great way to slowly ease its characters into all the new gameplay mechanics that this game has to offer and just slowly layer it on top. Now, once I finish, the game wants me to go back to that door where we couldn't open earlier, and with what we learned, I decided that I was going to make myself a nice flying machine by attaching the motors to the glider. However, I ended up getting stuck here, and I couldn't understand why I was no longer going any farther. However, the game is actually very logical, and it's not the game's fault that's not working. What I realized was because I put the fan behind the glider, it was actually getting caught in the little crevice over there because it's too big. So obviously, take it off and we're good to go. Now, what's really interesting is that the glider allows you to control its flight pattern pretty easily, and with that, I was able to gain flight. And since I knew you could fly in this game, I knew there was a way to do it. I just didn't know how. And what's really cool is that if you're smart enough, you can create something that flies like crazy, because I've seen some pretty wild contraptions on YouTube and TikTok. Now, once we get to the big door, we're able to get to our next little mechanic, which acts as a time rewind. But what I really like about this little small dungeon right here is that you actually didn't have to use the mechanic for the whole dungeon. This ascension skill that I gained from the previous shrine basically allowed me to climb up this dungeon without having to use the rewind mechanic, and you could just climb all the way up and just walk yourself over the ledges and just make your way to the door. I really like how the game actually gives you a lot of freedom of expression to solve your problems in your own way. If you really wanted to, you probably could have just brought a log with 5 pieces attached together and make a bridge the same way that I did. And if you think hard enough, and if you really want to, you probably could. And that's what I find so amazing about this game. It's that it actually doesn't really restrict you in any way, shape, or form without giving you at least a few options to do something else. Now, we make it to this door, and unfortunately, we are not worthy. We just don't have enough hearts to be able to open the door. Apparently, you need to have 4 hearts before you can open the door, so we're sent on another side quest to get enough resources to get that 4th heart. I make our way to where we're supposed to go and drown on the way. Kind of awkward, but once we get out of the dungeon, we're eventually able to make our way through. However, my small peanut brain thinks that I have to get out of the dungeon, go around, climb up, and go up this tree. A few minutes later, I realize, or not that I realize, chat tells me that apparently I was supposed to just ascend inside the dungeon. So, teleport back into the dungeon, go back into the cave, and use ascension skill, and lo and behold, pop myself around the other side, which is pretty cool. I did not think that I'd be able to scale through such a thick island, but apparently the only limitation to ascension is that there's no limit to how thick something is. The only limit is how high it is. If something is too high, you won't be able to go through, but if it's low enough, you can go through as thick of a thing as you want, which is pretty cool. Now, on our way back though, once we finish our dungeon and get what we need to do, I see this huge dragon in the distance, and I'm 100% positive the developer definitely did that on purpose, knowing that when we're flying back, we're gonna see this big ass dragon. But surprisingly, what I didn't realize was that the glider actually has a health total, and eventually the glider breaks and I kind of fall to my death. That's okay though, we're coming back around. So I realized that the reason why there's 2 gliders here is probably because they knew we were gonna mess up flying on a glider. So round 2. Now, second time to charm, and we eventually get back all the way to that door. We get our 4th heart, and we're able to finally get through this door. We make our way down to this little section right here, do a little bit of parkouring, and get triggered into a cutscene. It takes our Master Sword away, and it gives it to Zelda, which is really weird. I honestly thought that this all of a sudden became a time travel game. I don't know why, but it felt like that. But I was excited. That's what that reactions were. And then we are greeted with this amazing scene of a dragon, which we saw earlier. And honestly, what an amazing game. This game has so many layers to it, so many different mechanics that it just completely blows my mind. The artistic direction, the sound design, even the little stuff like cooking has absolutely just made this journey very enjoyable. And I really like how this game actually takes the time to spoon feed you information and just hold your hands and just take you by the rungs. Very different from Dark Souls, but both approach kind of work. This game also felt a little bit Souls-like with its combat, where mistakes can be honestly very punishing, but if you know how the game works and you're patient, it's actually not that bad. I also like how there's just one difficulty setting. I don't think there's a difficulty setting slider. This game is on one difficulty setting. I could be wrong. I haven't fiddled around enough to it, so I don't know, but can't complain. However, I will say it's just that I find that I struggled with the UI and the controls a bit, since I've never played on Switch before, and coming from Sekiro and Dark Souls, this was very confusing in the beginning, but eventually I was able to get the hang of it. It wasn't too big of a deal, but honestly, really, I honestly just like how the game stacks up its puzzles and its mechanics, so that when you're going into shrines, you're solving puzzles that have different layers and you have to leverage the knowledge that you had from before, which is honestly really amazing. Now, the thing that I say that really felt amazing is that it has an amazing sense of progression. I'm really enjoying this game now. I'm really looking forward to what the game has to offer. I'm going to continue to stream this on Twitch, so make sure you catch me there. I have my schedule posted up there, so you'll be able to see what time I stream, as I'm on Pacific time. And as usual, if you have any comments, questions, concerns, let me know. And if you enjoy this type of content, I'll try to make more. John Panio, signing out. I'll see you guys later. Bye for now.